Welcome, everyone, to episode 25 of The Bon Bon Show. Today is August 23rd, 2026. I am one of your hosts, Aaron. Today, we are going back to the past to revisit the glory days of video games and how they brought creators, developers, and fans together. It's certainly a blast from the past for me because back then, I was still a young boy searching for his way in life and getting my gaming news from magazines I was able to scrounge up from random garage sales and in the back alleys. Yep, that's where I got all my news from.
Hello, listeners, and hello to my Ali. I don't even know how to describe this. That was
Alley cat.
totally off script. Yeah, my Alley Cat Scrounging Gaming Magazine's friend Aaron. This is the Bonbon Show. In the last episode, we continued our Japan tour series by covering Hiroshima, but today we are switching gears and talking about the history of the Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3. Old heads like us, in the 90s and early 2000s, E3 was the biggest event on the calendar for gamers.
Yep.
The Video Game History Foundation has released a digital archive with so many materials about E3 in the early years. I really like the video talking about some of the stuff that they found and got and are having on display now. So yeah, let's chat about it. Episode 25 of the Bonbon Show starts now.
Yosh.
Yosh, yosh, yosh.
What's your earliest memory of E3? I'm very curious about all of
Ah,
this era.
exactly. Like I feel like so many of my what do I say, the things that I grew up with are now kind of like old
Mm.
stuff. No one knows about E3 or Super Nintendos or Game Boys and like sitcoms and stuff back in the day. But like my earliest memories of E3 is just like gaming magazines actually. I feel
Hmm.
like in high school especially, so like the late 90s, I used to buy maybe two or three different gaming magazines with my own like lunch money that I saved up, or trading it with my friends or getting them like a couple months old, because again back then a new game was coming out, nothing was wrong if you got it 3 months late, it was still air quotes brand new, but now you
Hmm.
have to get it on release day. But I digress. So yeah, E3 for me was all about the game trailers, the magazines, the GameSpot was my favorite place to get my gaming news back then as well. And there was a channel called G4, I feel. What was it called before G4?
Yes.
I
That was on
think
cable though. Didn't you have to have cable to watch that?
um do not ask me about how I got cable for free in a
Okay.
developing country back in the 1990s. Let's just say I had cable to watch G4. I'm forgetting the name of the hosts now, but like yeah, that's how you got your gaming news. And E3 was just like there was a build up for weeks leading up to the show. The show itself was covered, and then like 4 weeks after the show itself, there was like stuff being released in magazines, and there was no YouTube, no Reddit, no instant getting the information as soon as it leaves the developers or the publishers' mouths. You had to kind of go searching on forums and attend these kind of physical in-person expos to get your gaming news. And it was just a very different time. So yeah, I'm feeling old because now again
Mm.
you just go on YouTube and there's like dozens if not hundreds of videos about any particular game that you want to know about. But back then there was no such thing, and E3 was the biggest of the baddest expos for gaming for quite a while. I think the last E3, physical E3, was 2019.
Yep, yep. I think you're right.
And what about the digital one? That was
I think that was
20.
2021, right? Because 2020 COVID started,
Ah,
and then it
yes, yes,
was
yes.
canceled. Then they tried online once, and then it was canceled after that, and then everything kind of switched gears in the industry from that perspective.
Yeah. But yeah, but apparently from this Video Game History Foundation post and website, which I'll also link in the show notes, um, it's like E3 existed because gaming was tired of playing second fiddle. So
Hmm.
before 1995, apparently the video game industry showed its products at CES. And, CES is all about TVs, cameras, and, fancy upcoming consumer electronics. And while video games, as in the console itself, like the Super Nintendo or whatever at the time, was a consumer electronic, the software for said video games was kind of out of place, I feel, or they felt
Yeah.
at
Yep. That makes
CES.
sense.
So they kind of pivoted to starting their own show. Because again, video games was seen of as like a kids thing, like it's not like now where when a new video game is being released like Grand Theft Auto 6 we were talking about before the start of this episode, where that's probably gonna be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, what I say,
Entertainment gaming
entertainment.
release of all time.
Exactly, bigger than movies, bigger than albums, bigger than like huge in terms of dollar figure and the number of people who's gonna pick up a copy of that game. But I will not talk about the negative things related to Grand Theft Auto 6 right now. That's probably another episode. But again, back in the 90s, nobody took video games seriously, so they were like, let's prove video games were a cultural juggernaut deserving of its own spotlight. So they decided to make their own show called Electronic Entertainment Expo. Yeah, what was your
Yeah, I mean,
experience with your with E3, Aaron?
yeah, mine would have been around the same. Like as I said, I was like getting gaming news when we were younger. If you weren't like, I guess if you were an adult and you were in the industry, then I guess you would have been, I guess, in the thick of it, and your information would have been curated from your company or just being, working in that industry day to day. But like as a consumer of that, being a kid, like in 1995, I would have been 9 years old. So getting
Mm-hmm.
information on a like updated basis came from magazines as well. And yeah, my information would have been months, if not a year old, based on how old of a magazine I was able to find at the summer garage sale that I would go to at any particular time, or in the back alley, or in the garbage can. Actually, I did. This is a little bit of an off story, but I remember being at school. I can't remember what grade I was. I was maybe in like grade 5 or 6 or something. And we had there was like a huge recycle container outside of the school grounds, or kind of just like adjacent to the school grounds. And I remember walking by it once, and I saw a magazine on the ground, and I think it was a car magazine. I was like, "Oh, this is like in really good condition. This is cool." And I don't know why, but because it was like right beside the recycle container, it was like a huge metal container. The lid was like half open, so I just kind of peered inside,
Ha ha
and
ha.
it just so happened to be like boxes and boxes of various magazines, like gaming magazines and car magazines and whatever other magazines. I was like, oh my goodness, I just like stumbled into the mother load of magazines. I'm like a kid, right? Like I don't have any money. So I jumped in there. I jumped into this metal recycle container, and I just like grabbed a box of magazines, whatever I could take, and would take them home. And now I had like so much content to consume from like
Uh-huh.
cars to sports to gaming. So yeah, I guess grabbing them from an alley wasn't so out of character for me if I was able to grab or find something. But yeah, so I think in those magazines, I'm sure I don't recall any particular article vividly, but I'm sure E3 was in those magazines for sure. So that would have been my first, I guess, introduction to it. Not really knowing or caring all that much about the convention itself, because again, I wasn't in the industry to that extent. I was morely just concerned, like anybody else my age, was just, is there a game coming out that looks like it's interesting to me that I can go and rent from the video game store when it comes out? Um, so that was likely where it started for me. And then as I got older and, digital content being a thing, then we could kind of participate to an extent by watching the different companies come on stage and announce the new console or the new games or whatever that might be. So then you get a little bit more savvy that way. But as a kid, I feel like the information comes at you at very like a slow pace and it's piece by
Mm-hmm.
piece, and you kind of put it together or you don't, and you just wait for the game to come out whenever it does. You kind of just forget about it until yeah, I'm at the video rental store. I'm like, oh, this game's out. Cool. I'm gonna rent it.
Yeah.
So E3 not being anything that I like tracked specifically until later on, probably in like, the 2010s. I'd say probably for like, I guess the last decade that it was out, I was probably more into it at that point because then I would have been, finished high school and moving on to other things, university, and having more disposable income and a little bit more, I guess, had the ability to play games to more of an extent.
Hmm.
So that's probably where I consumed it the most as opposed to when I was younger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting about diving into an alley and stealing someone else's. I mean, taking
No,
up
no, I
some.
wasn't stealing. I wasn't stealing. They're already throwing them into the recycle bin. I was just saving
Okay.
them from being shredded to bits. I
Okay.
preserved history.
Nice. Yeah, but
Yeah, that was.
it's what I say. E3, especially in those early years, I don't know, it's just fascinating comparing it to what we have now. I know I'm kind of going ahead
Mhm.
in our show notes, but like now when we are you said it in your talk about E3 as well, where we are so used to just getting the information instantly now. Like Nintendo is coming out with a video game, they're gonna do a thing on YouTube, or they're gonna have bombard you with that information. But back then, you kind of had to search and go looking for what video game you wanted to get and kind of track to see when it was gonna be released. And as you said, sometimes you forget about it and you're going through, I don't know, an electronic store, a rental store, and you run into it and like, oh wait, the new, I don't know, Fire Emblem might have been the case for me because
Mhm.
back then I was a really big Fire Emblem and Advance Wars buff, and I remember, like having certain franchises or video games that you'd look out for any new news about them. But this what do you call it? This archive of information from the Video Game History Foundation is I don't know, amazing. Like they have like a layout of the different expos over the years. They have like a E3 daily scanned magazine that they would have daily at the expo itself. They have
Mhm.
videos of like really rare trailers and gadgets and stuff from way back in the day. Um, they've got every booth, every map, every panel from 1995 to 2006. Like this is like looking at like the video, and I'll also link the video in the show notes. It's just like they're they said that fire that's lit into your belly as a child, as you said, where you saw those magazines and you would think that, oh, I need to grab all of these and slowly consume them over time. I feel
Hmm.
like some of that magic has been lost. And again, it might just be we old men talking about back in my day, you had to walk 5 miles to get to the store. Now there's a Walmart around the corner and you just go get a glass of milk. But we had to raise the cow and grab that udder and squeeze. Now, what do you mean your milk comes in a carton?
Yeah, I
But
think like even just for me, even like looking at the magazines because that's all I had. And I remember I would just, if I only had, two or three, because over time my mom would probably recycle them. So I know a lot of them are probably gone. I might have still a few hanging around at home, but the ones that I had, if I was going on a road trip, with my family somewhere, or even just at home, I'd have like two or three magazines and I would read it from front to back over,
mm-hmm.
it might take me a day or however long it would take me, and then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm done. And then I'm just going to read it again because that's all I have. So you read the same article about the this particular game, and then this particular guide or this particular event, in this case like E3, you just reread it over and over and over again. And then I wasn't reading the next month's episode like magazine print. I was reading maybe the one 6 months later, so you wouldn't even get any
Mm-hmm.
follow up to the any of the articles that you were
Exactly.
reading. So you were just
Sometimes
like,
you're in a guide that's split between multiple
yeah,
magazines, and I remember literally bringing magazines to school and like asking friends like, like they're splitting this guide over multiple editions. Like anybody have the August 20 the August 1999 edition, because I only have the July and the September and I need to know how to do you know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah. I remember the magazines like in the '90s, just the way that they were designed, like from the font and the very like fantastical nature of everything was just marketed in
Mm-hmm.
such a different way than it is now. When I was watching
Yeah.
the video about E3 that you had sent, and just seeing how all the different booths were designed and the layout
Mm-hmm.
of the monitors and the screens, and just like every game that was being presented that had its own booth at the E3 was very like how they would present it in the magazine, just like in the physical version of that,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like over the top in nature and just very 90s looking.
The
Um,
booths were like multi-story,
yeah, lots of
giant
big
screens
colors and
and
just,
loud. Yeah.
yeah, vibrant and just not so. I feel like the today's would be like very minimal and, more like more
Muted.
electronic in nature, whereas back in
Mm-hmm.
the day it was more physical and everything was like either handmade or printed or whatever, and so it just like had that more handmade feel to it as opposed to what
Yeah.
it might look like today. And so seeing that in print and then seeing it in the videos kind of like in a physical version was like, it brought me right back into that 90s feel, which was like pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're a old head like us, or you're just interested in looking at like the E3 of yesteryear, um, I can I recommend that you guys visit gamehistory.org/E3 history, and I'll just read a little bit like the first paragraph of the page, and then kind of go through what is included and stuff you can dive in. I've been diving in for about a month now, and I still haven't covered everything. I think it was released in mid-July, and now it's mid towards the end of August, August 23rd, 2026, and I'm still like diving into stuff. I have it almost permanently opened on a tab in my browser, and I've just like been going through and looking at, as you said, advertisements. Like there's like a section with like old like N64 and Super Nintendo trailers that just look so bad now. But back then you'd be like, oh my god, this is the best graphics I've ever seen. But now you're
Yep,
like,
exactly.
oh, that looks terrible. But yeah, so this is what the Video Game History Foundation says that for over 20 years, E3 was the highest profile event in video games. Founded in 1995 by the Interactive Digital Software Association and Infotainment World, E3 was a larger than life spectacle that celebrated the present and future of gaming. Although nominally a trade show, E3 has become renowned for its over the top booths and marketing gimmicks. See, we talked about that.
Hmm.
Dramatic press conference reveals and generally putting a massive spotlight on the video game business. So, what is included in this collection? Let me scroll down. So, if you want to dive in, you can check out Caroline Rauch. I think that's how it's pronounced. She has released thousands of pages of stuff related to the organization of E3. Anthony Parisi, nearly 12 hours of conferences and gameplay footage from the early years of the event. Electronic Entertainment Expo directories, every booth, every map, every panel from 1995 to 2006. That's what, 11 years, if I can math,
Yep.
or 12 years? I don't know. I don't do math very well. What I've been really getting into is the E3 Show Daily, which is like a daily news update from E3 covering 10 years of the event. So this is like a printed thing that you physically read through what happened at E3 for a particular day. It's complete with like ads. I saw like a Tomb Raider ad from like 1999, and it just was like bringing back memories of, I could almost smell those gaming magazines that I used to read back in the day. They've got a lot of Nintendo related B-roll, so high quality VHS rips of pre-release Nintendo 64 game footage, including the legendary Super Mario 64, which is one of the best-selling video games of all time, and stuff. And they've got like an assortment of footage and gameplay and all kinds of footage from the show floor itself, like people going about their business, just enjoying it, which is something that you really don't see. Because how do you get your game information and trailer news now, Aaron?
Yeah, it's like directly what you want to see when you want to see it. So the cool thing about all these things is that you were introduced and like looking at the old magazines or go if you were able to go to this stuff is that you're not just there to see what you want to see, but you're also just going to see the unexpected too and then leave like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
with something new that you might have, because it's always nice to be like, oh yeah, I want to do this and this and this and do those things. That's fine too, but it's always nice to be like be surprised by something you weren't expecting to, you weren't thinking
Yeah.
about going there, right? So but nowadays, you see a trailer for the game that you want to see, and then a lot of the new stuff that comes out, unless you're really into the hobby and you're like focused on reading news and certain types of commentary on the greater industry and what's coming out or what's going on, it's really easy just to get focused on the few things you like, and everything else just kind of like filters and becomes non apparent to you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's good and bad about that, but I guess the bad one of the bad parts is you just sometimes you don't find out about things that you could be really interested in, and it's kind of too bad, but that's kind of just the way algorithms and all that stuff work these days.
Yeah, but to
Where
be
it's
fair, like back then, to play devil's advocate, there were probably a couple dozen games coming out for the entire year.
yeah,
But
it was less
now,
for sure.
yeah, there are what, hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of games coming out every year in different genres, different systems. So like I guess it makes sense back then where, if you had three or four games that you would be looking out for, you'd get that type of information or a franchise that you're into. But now there's so much to absorb that it's basically
Yeah.
impossible to know about all these things. So maybe you're just
Hmm.
I don't know, Fortnite. Oh my God, I just said Fortnite on the podcast. Forgive me. Maybe you're a Fortnite person, so you've only played Fortnite for the last 5 6 years. Like to me, that's kind of crazy. Thinking back in the '90s, where we played so many different video games on different genres and different systems. But now I'm realizing just a little side quest here where there are people who have only played one video game and only play one video game for years at a time, who buy
Hmm.
stuff in said video game, wait on updates for said video game. I guess the live service type of people. But like, yeah, I feel like Destiny was like that. Fortnite is like that. Apex Legends, they take up so much of your time that you have no time to play other games. But back then we were playing different genres, different systems, you know, platformers, adventure games, RPGs. It was just if you're a gamer, you played video games. But now,
Yeah.
you might just be a RPG person or a Final Fantasy person or a Call of Duty, or you just get the new FIFA every year type of. So it's, yeah, I guess the cultural impact of video games is kind of what a part of what this kind of archive highlights, and how that culture has changed, like all other cultures like music or fashion or whatever changes over time. I guess video games are no different.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you make a good point. Like, yeah, how we consume games, the market was different. It was still very like small and growing, and just like any industry, I guess they're always trying to get bigger and bigger and want their consumer base to get larger and whatever that looks like. But like you said, when back in the day there was less games coming out, so you had more time to try different things, and games were generally shorter. Um, didn't have as many mechanics. You could try lots of different things. Whereas, yeah, nowadays, like you had mentioned, some games try to be your like one game kind of fits all. Like they try to do everything and try to take up all your time. And so, like if you enjoy that, that's really cool too. But on the other side, it's like it's different because if you're only ever playing one game, what about all the other pieces of media? Not even just games, but like books and other forms of entertainment that you could also be interacting with that maybe you're not, because the one game that you're playing is like just play me, just play me, just spend time with me. Because
Yeah.
there's always something new. Whereas sometimes having an end to something allows you to start something new somewhere else and get a different perspective or learn something new or see a different world.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that's kind of the one nice thing about, I guess, the early days that E3 tried to showcase, is that games were smaller, they had a beginning, middle, and end, they didn't continue on forever, and then you could spend some time with them, and then you were off to the next story or the next world that you could uh, deep dive in for a little bit and then jump to the next one. So yeah, it's just cool to see this being archived and the people spending their time to do this work to kind of highlight that point in time when gaming was at this point and what the industry was like and how people were spending the time. And I'm sure someday there'll be a video game archive of what today is like, and whatever we have in the future, we'll look back on today
Yeah.
and be like, it
Do you
was
remember?
pretty good, or we'll have
Yeah,
our
we used to
thoughts and
watch our
opinions.
stuff on YouTube, and now we
Yeah,
just beam it directly into our brains. We used to touch the controllers buttons like no one touches controller buttons anymore. We move the buttons with our minds. What are you talking
yeah.
about?
So yeah, it'll be
But yeah,
interesting to see what that would look like. So it's always interesting to look back and appreciate what we had then with
yeah.
different eyes now that we're older. Um, but not to say anything that people are doing today or spending their time playing games is just fine too, right?
Hmm.
It's just different than what it was when we were kids. So
Yeah, and that's why preservation matters. Like that's also a hot topic in
hmm.
today's modern, not just gaming, but we're focused on gaming now, where E3 is no longer happening. But having these maps, these videos, these newspapers, these tapes preserved kind of allows us to look back at how the modern gaming industry was shaped. You know what I mean? So, like, if like E3 is important or was important to what we have now, where a game like Grand Theft Auto 6 is gonna be the biggest entertainment release ever. You know what I mean? But back then, during the early years of E3, like people used to laugh at video game companies and think it's just for my kid or whatever. I'll never play that. But now we've all grown up with it. We're all
Hmm.
playing video games. It's huge, bigger than TV, bigger than movies, bigger than all of those things. And yeah, we gotta preserve and keep these expose these video games, live service or otherwise, because who to tell, the first E3 was in 1999, 1995.
95. Yeah.
Yeah, and here we are, what, 30 plus years later, reminiscing on that stuff, like 30 years from now, with everything, with how everything is going as it relates to, like shutting down games and deleting bot material from people's accounts and stuff like that. Maybe we won't have anything tangible to look back on, as we now have magazines and videos and stuff from E3. So yeah, what
Yeah.
are gaming expos like now, by the way? Like, I know there's Summer Games Fest, which I think I enjoyed the last one, but sometimes they get a bit cringy. And
Yeah.
I know the different video game companies or console makers at least have their own videos or streams that they do now.
Yeah. I feel like video game Summer Games Fest and the Video Game Awards are very like,
Yeah.
especially the Video Game Awards. There, it's not about the video. It's not about the awards at all. Generally,
Mm.
maybe like Game of the Year, because I feel like they actually get to talk a bit and like actually show some appreciation and talk about the industry, and they're very relevant, I guess. But I think a lot of the awards are very rushed, and it's less about the awards and more just about showing world premiere and like just trailers of games, and just like pump out as many games as we can because these developers paid us money, or these publishers paid us money to show all this stuff. And so it can be kind of cool. Year to year my opinions change, I guess, based on what's coming out, but I feel like the last few years I've been mostly disappointed by them. I think my whole gaming mentality, the amount of time I have to game, what I like in gaming now is very like, it's very curated. So most games don't really fit that bucket for me much anymore. So it takes me a lot more to get excited for certain games. So
Hmm.
there's just less likelihood of games like really getting me excited in general. I think that's just me getting older and
Oh,
just having less
okay,
time. But
Grandpa.
yeah.
Take your medication. Come on, let's get Grandpa to bed, boys and girls.
So I think they're still fine, but they're less about like, at least what's presented to us as a viewer on online. It's just a bunch of people sitting in a room watching a screen and some presenters, and it's less about the let's go
The
to a 3 or 4 day convention and go to different
mm,
booths and try out
with
games
giant
sort of thing. So
posters
it's,
and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, it's very different, but I think we're still lucky that there's still what Gamescom in Germany. There's, from the big ones at least, there's Tokyo Game Show. I think there's still a few others around the world that kind of, maybe not
yeah,
as big as E3, but are treated very big in their local areas. And so we get some insight into some of those. Depending on what get published and viewed online. And
yeah.
obviously, I don't get to go to those.
Speaking
So
of
at least
not
we still have
getting
some
to go to
visitors.
those, I am going to Tokyo Game Show.
Oh,
I've bought the tickets. I need to pick it up at the convenience store. But yeah, the last time I went to TGS was 2011 when I
wow.
came to Japan. around that time and found out there was TGS happening and managed to get a ticket, and that was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that'd
But
be so
I
cool.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It's the tickets aren't too expensive. I live in Tokyo now. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to TGS 2026. So look out for, maybe we can do an episode about my experience at TGS after absorbing all this E3 old school grandpa type energy. I'm gonna go to TGS, being probably the oldest person there, looking around at these
You just have
youngins,
for
not
everybody.
understanding. Back in the day, we had to have a printed magazine. What do you mean you have a phone app that tells you where to go? You had to
Yeah.
join a line and wait for hours to play Street Fighter 2. What do you mean? You log in and wait. But yeah, Gamescom is cool. TGS, I'll be going in mid to late September. I need to double check the date. So yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add related to the E3 nest before we head out?
Yeah, I think if I was older, like back in the day, I think it would have been cool. I don't know what it was like to get, I guess, access, because I know sometimes it's more of just like there's the business side and then there's like usually some public access. So I don't know how hard or difficult it was to, get some public access tickets or whatever, but had the timing been right, I was older or whatever, it would have been really fun and interesting to go and see E3 in person. And then by the time I had more visibility to it, it was just online and you're just watching either the live version or the random funny cuts that I would watch. There was this guy on YouTube. There was this there was this channel called Video Gamer. I don't know if they're still around. They might not be, but at the
Mm-hmm.
time there was this guy. His name was Matt Lees. He's a British dude, and he would do like his abridged versions of the E3s from the 2010s ish era. And he would do like funny voiceovers and kind of poke fun at the different developers and companies and publishers doing their interviews and standing up on stage really awkwardly with their hands behind their back or in their pockets or whatever they were doing. It was just, funny. It was funny seeing someone's kind
Mm.
of like comedic take, so I always thought that was fun. But yeah, it's just nice to go through the history of where where videos games sort of, I guess, one part where they came from. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone participated in E3, but it was just a cool point in time to like see what it was like, what people were doing, how it developed, where it started from, where it got to, and ultimately um, the end of it all. And I guess the main companies kind of just taking, really figuring out they didn't really need E3. They don't really need these types of conventions anymore because they have the ability and the user consumer base to just kind of run their own shows now,
Mm-hmm.
um, which kind of loses that bit of community because everything's just like digital. So you get PlayStation State of Play or Nintendo Direct, or I
But
think it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, some people want that convenience of just
yeah,
sitting in their couch. I guess that's the case with music industry and the movie industry. Like back in the day, you'd have to physically go to the movie theater, and that was an experience. But now movies come out, and you just wait literally a month after release, and it's already on the streaming services. I think, what was the name of that movie that came out recently that I'm surprised it's already on the streaming services. But anyway, that's the case now,
yeah,
where movie comes out in July and you just wait until August and you watch it. Movie music artist releases an album. I remember lining up to get like the Lauryn Hill album when it was released, but now you just pop onto Spotify or YouTube
yeah,
Music or whatever and listen it for free. I guess it's the same with video games where, like why spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for some of these bigger companies to make these giant booths and stuff. And then you could spend a fraction of that and just do a stream from a special studio in your headquarters and reach more people and sell more copies. So I guess
yeah.
this is a
Yeah,
interesting
it makes
time.
sense in the digital age, but there's a, I guess, loss of in-person community and interaction and magic that happens when you bring people together in a very fun and um, lighthearted atmosphere. But no, I
Yeah.
get it from a different
Business.
perspective as well. Yeah, business perspective, I suppose. But good
Yeah.
and bad and all of it. I mean, I guess you just, if you want to maintain the community, you can always do a live stream with your friends and, jump on voice chat together or invite people over and watch it together. So there's ways to kind of like
Mm.
supplement it to a degree, but it will never be back like how it was. Those days are gone. And we just will have what we have now, and then how things will change over time. We will see. We will
Okay,
go through that
Grandpa.
together.
It's, yeah, we don't have to milk our own cows anymore. Okay, we
I
3D
want to
print
milk my own cows.
we
Let me.
3D print our milk now. That's the modern way.
Oh, that's why it has a weird taste to it.
But this has been episode 25 of the Bonbon Show, talking about the good old days of E3. Please again check out the Video Game History Foundation's digital archive of all the E3 related stuff. I'll post it in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And you can also find us on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. My name is Kirk, and I will see you in the next episode of The Bonbon Show.
See you later, everybody. Matane.